Okay, hi everyone. This is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and we've got a new look board here, so hopefully it'll come out all right since the screen has been minimized a little bit compared to what it was before. So hopefully it'll still look all right, and as far as the size goes. And to go along with the kind of new look board, we have sort of a new little series here. And what I thought I would do is show some of my old games, some of them very old games, and I think there's some value in these old games, especially for this kind of lecture presentation. So one thing that's kind of fun is just to see how badly I played, both as a youngster, just taking my first steps in tournaments, but even unfortunately as a relatively mature player too. So there's always that. It's always fun to see the authority, quote unquote, mess up and get stuff wrong every now and then. But I think it's also interesting because as the games go farther and farther back in time, I think the character of the mistakes becomes more like the kinds of mistakes that maybe some of you will see in your own games. So, you know, I think for any level of player, the kinds of mistakes that are typical are going to be different. So I hope that some of these mistakes that I'm going to show you from my really old games will be ones that you might be able to identify with and learn from, so you can avoid them in your own games, or at least minimize the chances that they'll occur in your own games. So I hope you'll enjoy this. Look forward to your feedback on the concept as well as the execution of that concept, and in some cases the execution of the person playing the game, which generally is me. Though I think in this game, I come out all right. Now I had white in this game. And this was played back in 1980 when I was 13, just a little while before I turned 14. And as I said, I think I said my third tournament game ever. First round I had lost to a 1500. Round 2 I had beaten a 1240, and I was absolutely ecstatic about this. This guy was unrated, I believe, and after I won this, then the fourth round I beat a 1700, and I was practically performing cartwheels. So when I got my first rating from this and one other tournament that was played about the same time, and it was 1725. I mean, I was just on cloud nine. I mean, I thought that this was the most incredible performance that I could have ever imagined, certainly for that point in time. So I'm not really sure where I am. I have no special confidence at this time. Just enjoying the game, doing my best, and hey, if I win, great. But no expectations. All right. Well, let's turn to this game and look at this point. So I'm a pawn up, but it's kind of precarious. My e5 pawn is not looking well, and in fact, it looks like my opponent can simply take it here. So take a moment. Here's a quick little simple tactical problem for you. I hope it's simple. What happens if black takes the pawn on e5? Okay, well hopefully you all caught the little back rank trick that I had prepared. If my opponent played rook takes e5, I had rook takes d4. And okay, I mean, it's just a swap of pawns, but I think because my e5 pawn is kind of vulnerable, it slightly favors me. And the point of this, in case you haven't seen it yet, is that if he takes the rook, I play rook to b8 check, and because his king can't go to h7, he's mated. I mean, drops the rook back, I take it. That's checkmate. So after bishop to e4, my opponent played g6, taking care of the back rank problems, and now I played rook to b4. Now here, if he had simply taken the e-pawn, we would have ended up with an equal position, this time because he exploits my weak back rank. So f5, I've got to go back to d3, check here, rook to a1. If I play rook to d3, this is just a blunder because of bishop to c4, and I won't be able to protect my bishop on f1. I mean, I can check, but that doesn't solve the problem. So I have to play a4 here to hold on to the pawn for any length of time, but that length of time is quite short. Bishop to b3, next he takes the pawn, and it's just a dead drawn position. So caught a bit of a break there. He played bishop to c4. All right, so now I played f3. Useful move, so I both prevent the mate and I protect my bishop. So that way when he plays rook takes e5, my bishop won't be hanging. So he plays d3. King f2, bishop a6. We'll run off a few moves here kind of quickly. Okay, actually here we have a slightly interesting moment. So at this point, take a look and see if you can determine if it makes a difference which way I should recapture the bishop. Alright, well, here's the thing. Generally speaking, you want to control, or you want your rooks to be behind passed pawns. So in other words, if the pawn's going this way, as of course mine is, then both black and white would like to have their rooks on either of these two squares. That way, well, there are a few reasons for this. So it's easier to push the pawn. You don't have to worry about your rook getting out of the way. Also, the defending side's rook, well, whoever's rook is in front of the pawn is going to get squeezed and run out of squares. So whether it's white, let's say white's rook goes to a8, when the pawn goes to a7, then black's rook will have a1 through a6 to maneuver on, while white's rook is just stuck on a8 and has no place to go. Conversely, of course, if the white rook is on a1 or a2 and black's rook is in front of the pawn, then as the white pawn charges up the board, black's rook becomes less and less mobile. So for that reason, I think rook 6 takes d3 is probably the best move. And the idea is that after rook takes e5, we play rook 3 to d2. Okay, whether black exchanges or not, it'll be kind of similar. So let's say he takes, plays rook to a4, trying to blockade the pawn as quickly as possible. But now king f2, and the white king is simply going to run over to the queen side and then start pushing the pawns. And the great thing for white is that with this rook on a2, it's beautifully placed because it's protecting the pawn on g2 and thus keeping the king side structure very safe. So white has pretty much an ideal situation here, an ideal endgame position. And, well, I think white is winning here. Actually, let me, oops, get rid of these. And there's no reason to do it that way. We should go to e3, take the more advanced position. And by doing it that way, it also makes the arrow from a2 to g2 clearer. Okay, so after bishop takes d3, I think that would have been the right way to recapture. So instead I played rook 1 takes d3, played rook takes e5. Okay, I played rook to d2. The slight difference now, though, is that I think black can play rook to e2. And, of course, the rook can't really move because then g2 will hang. So let's say rook takes e2, rook takes e2. And now white's rook can't get behind. Rook to d1, just rook to a2. And black's rook gets there first. Okay, so white has a couple of ways to go from here. He can play rook to d3 and try to defend the rook from the pawn from the side. That's not likely to be very promising here, in part because the white king is going to have a very difficult time working its way over the queen side. So if my king can't get over there, then it's there's no real way for me to make progress. I mean, the king side is just even. Trading off all the pawns there won't achieve anything. And, well, if I can't get to the king side, then it's quite tough. So the other alternative is to bring the rook to d8 instead, and then bring the rook to a8. Again, this is, well, we talked about this kind of idea in this sort of endgame, I think 2 shows ago now, maybe 3 shows ago, where I looked at this endgame that I played against Gauri Shankar from one of those North American FIDE Invitational tournaments in Chicago. And it was a game where I had white, and I won the rook ending, though he probably should have drawn that. So here I think black has an especially favorable version of that kind of ending, because again, the white king is just really not well placed on g3. I mean, it's very hard for it to move over to the queen side. And also, of course, the king side pawns are very vulnerable. So this should be a draw. Alright, so that's the difference between the way I recaptured here. So rook 6 takes d3. I'm probably winning. That might be a little bit premature, but good winning chances for sure. Whereas after rook 1 takes d3, if my opponent had played rook to e2 now, would have been very difficult to win. So instead he played rook to c3. And here, I think I actually made the right move. So again, multiple plans here. One is to play rook to a2. So again, we stick the rook behind the passer. But the problem is rook to a5, and just the pawn is lost. So a5, rook c4, goodbye extra pawn, simple draw. Okay, another plan is to play rook 6 to d3 first, and then play rook to a2. But I'm not really sure what's going on here. So as long as black's keeping both rooks, it's a lot less simple. Now I can still try to make progress by bringing my king over to b2, and then playing rook to b4, and trying to work my way up from there. Or maybe I could play rook to a1, rook to c1, rook to c3, and then rook to b4. And just try to crawl up one rank at a time. And while it's kind of a slow plan, maybe black doesn't have that much he can do against it. So one thing you could try maybe is g4 once my king goes to f2, swap off some pawns, and go for counterplay there. Okay, so it's far from clear that white is winning. I would definitely never say that about this position without a great deal of analysis. But I'm just saying that white at least has a plan here. So it's not as dead as it might look with these two rooks on the a file, these two black rooks on the a file, impeding the advance of the pawn. All right. Well, what I played instead was rook to a6, and I think this is probably the best that I can do here. It's not ideal having my rook in front of the pawn, as I mentioned, but I just need to do this to keep my pawn safeguarded. Okay. Played rook e to e3. I played a4, and now my opponent played a very clever but unsound trick that worked. So what he played here, kind of cleverly, is g4. And his idea was this. After king takes g4, rook c4 check, king g3, plays rook to a3, and it looks like he just wins the pawn back, and that's going to be the end of that. We'll just reach a 3-on-2 kingside structure, which is just an easy draw, especially because he's got the right pawns. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So take a look here, see if you can figure out what white's move should play. So it's an interesting position. If I don't come up with something really good, then it just will be a dead draw. Well, maybe not a dead draw, as we'll see, but a position that at least should be a dead draw. Should be a draw anyway. Okay. Well, I hope you tried to work out what's best here for white. I think there are three tries, at least. One is the basically hopeless move that I made in the game. The second is to play rook to d8 check. This, I think, is maybe the most obvious. And in fact, after the game, I mean, I had looked in my notes, my very old notes, when I was preparing this, and I had given the move that I played in the game 2 question marks, and I just assumed, really, without much thought, that this was just an easy win. And now I look at it and I wonder, what I was on, because after rook to c2, white has two problems. So first of all, there's the simple threat of rook to a2, rook a to a2, followed by devouring white's kingside. So this is certainly nothing great. And another point is that I think black could probably play, if he wanted to, simply rook c to a2, and just sit there. And what's white going to do? I mean, I can't promote the pawn without moving the rook away, but once the rook moves away, I lose the pawn. So I think this really has no chance of winning at all. So it's just kind of interesting that my analysis of this was very shallow. I just thought, well, I saved the pawn and I'm winning because I'm 2 pawns up, but just didn't look. And I think this is important. One reason why it's important, well, a couple of reasons. So one is, you want to try to get into the habit of not making such immediate reactions. And the other point, or more specific point, is that the materialism implicit in my judgment was, again, rather superficial. Okay, sure, I'm up 2 pawns. Maybe I'll even keep the pawn, but I have to pay attention to what my opponent is up to as well. And he can make threats too, so he can defend both from a purely defensive standpoint, and also he can counterattack. And actually, even a third thing that black can do here, maybe he can even just sit here and do nothing. Because, okay, let's say I play a5, he plays rook to c5. I move my rook from 6 to a7, he waits, I play a6, he plays rook to c6, and once again, there's no way for me to advance the pawn once it gets to a6 without just losing it, because I can't move the pawn without moving a rook, but I can't move a rook without losing the a pawn. So, in short, my judgment there was completely mistaken. Sorry, I'm kind of fiddling around with the mic here, so hopefully it's not too bad. Okay, so the move played in the game was rook to a8 check, and after this I do simply lose the pawn for well, for free. I don't get anything out of it. But what I missed, both in the game and in my early notes, but now seems obvious to me as a reasonably strong player, was to play rook to d7, and just to jettison the pawn, but go for my own play. So here, let's say he plays rook a to a4, I play rook to f6, and there we go, I win this pawn. Now, again, the story is not over yet. Winning the pawn isn't checkmate, and while 2 pawns up for nothing will be enough to win, black can go for counterplay, so we have to work that out here. So rook to c2, or rook to a2 would be the same thing. And now, if you haven't already worked this out, figure out which way white should capture the pawn on f7. Now, the obvious capture is to play rook f takes f7 to get the so-called blind pigs, the doubled rooks on the 7th rank. Now, the reason they're called blind pigs is because they eat everything in sight. However, as you can see, there's nothing to eat, so the trough is empty. And even worse, black has his own little bit of blind piggery here, and I lose my g-pawn. And, okay, it's still a dangerous position for black. I mean, I think white might still be winning. Not 100% sure about that, but black's, let's say, defensive task has not come to a complete conclusion just yet. But it's not that easy for me either. So the right way to take is this way. And here's the interesting point. If black does nothing, well, then I'm simply up 2 pawns. So that's okay by me. And if he goes for the counterattack, well, he gets mated here. So check, check again, check number 3, and there's mate. So that's a pretty convincing way to conclude the battle there. Now, black doesn't have to allow it, but if he doesn't have rook a to a2 here, then he's simply lost. So that's, I think, a pretty well forcing variation. After rook to d7, I believe that black is losing. And if he plays rook c takes a4 instead, well, then he's not even going to be able to double on the 7th rank, on his 7th rank. So there again, rook to f6 wins, and it's even simpler. I mean, you can play this, but I play that, and 2 pawns ahead. It's a very, very simple win. So this won't be difficult. All right. So instead of rook to d7, as I said, I played rook to a8 check. He went up. And now, typical kid fashion here. So I push the pawn all the way up as if it's going to make any difference. So it's like I keep hoping some miracle will happen with one more push. All right, and now I make a very, well, I would say it's an inaccuracy for sure. So I play rook to g8 check. Okay, so it's just a cutesy way of giving up the pawn. The reason why I think it's inaccurate is that if there are any winning chances to be had here, at least, well, if there are any winning chances that can reasonably be had here, as opposed to just getting lucky as in the game, then I think white should try to keep both rooks on. There's more prospects for causing trouble with 2 rooks on the board, because you can create some serious threats. I mean, then mating ideas can become a genuine possibility, which they can't at all become, well, normally speaking, with a single rook. So this too is an error. So here, I think I just liked it because it was cute, but no especially good reason. All right, now this should be a dead draw. If black's pawn on f7 were in fact on h7, then white would have small winning chances, very small, but they would exist because the prospective passed pawn that I could create would be an f pawn. Here, on the other hand, with him having an f pawn, the passed pawn that I would create is an h pawn, and that, as I hope you know, is just about the worst possible pawn to have in most endings, and rook endings certainly. I mean, as long as the king is in the neighborhood. So with an f pawn, c pawn, or a central pawn, white can have reasonable winning chances. I mean, black at least has to know the Philidor defense, and if you can't get that, then the defensive tries have to be much more sophisticated. If it's an h pawn, or a rook pawn more generally, and even a g and a b pawn, black can defend completely passively. So there's no drawing technique that works against another pawn that doesn't also work for a rook pawn, but several more also work for a rook pawn. So for those reasons, this is really should just be a very, very simple draw for black. However, we're beginners, at least in tournament chess, and things go wrong. Okay, so he plays f6. This is okay. I mean, it's not the move that I would have made. I would prefer just to keep the pawn on f7. But all right, f6 doesn't hurt anything. Now here I should play h4. And what I should try to do is to exchange my h-pawn for his g-pawn. Okay, the h-pawn gives me no winning chances, so it's useful for me to exchange it off and then try to just advance my pawns in a way where I gain a space advantage and try to constrict him, not being in a hurry to trade off pawns. So I definitely don't want to trade pawns any sooner than I have to, but if I can use my pawns just to grab space, then that can give me very, very slim hopes, but hopes. Also, in terms of trading, if I have to trade, I want to end up with an f-pawn. So I trade the h-pawn for the g-pawn, and then I would trade the g-pawn for his f-pawn, and then have my f-pawn as the last best hope for mankind, at least if mankind rests on me winning this game. All right, so h4, anyways, would be the place to start. Okay, I played king to g4, which achieves nothing after rook to c2, king h3 here, and now another poor move on my part, g4. The reason why this is poor is that, okay, you should just play g5. And, all right, this prevents me from grabbing any space. And also, okay, let's say I play king g3 to prepare h4. I can play rook to c3 and be kind of a nuisance here. So now I'd have to bring my rook back somewhere, maybe, let's say to a5, and then put it on f5, and then play h4. All right, so even this is not really all that exciting. But okay, so rook c1, h4, takes, here, king g6. And, all right, in this position, black's pieces are placed perfectly. If I play f4 here, which I was suggesting before, that I want to push these pawns to try to cramp my opponent, but now he's just going to bother me. So he's just going to give checks, and my king is going to have to do something awkward. Okay, so let's say there, rook f1. If he brings his rook to f5 or to a4, then he has to be a little bit passive. He doesn't want to. I don't want to play f5 because king g5, and then now black is just equal and probably going to win my pawn right away. So this has no real chances. Okay, if king to f4, this is a much better try. Well, then here the way for black to play is rook to b1. So it's always a good idea to try to bother the strong side's king. I mean, that's kind of the basic idea behind the Philidor's defense in the rook and 1 versus rook ending. And same general principles go here. So I want to keep my rook flexible, so that way if his king comes back to g3, I can check him on g1. If he stays up here, I can check him on b4. And just make it really incredibly difficult for him to make progress. I keep saying him, of course I had white in this game, so that's what he should have done to me. All right, well, after g4, he played king to h6. And this is, okay, it's not a blunder, but it's a step in the wrong direction. And actually we'll see that I make a similarly strange decision in a later game. I think it might even be the next game that I want to present here. So king to h6. Now this looks like some kind of active plan here. So he wants to put his king on g5. The thing is, there's simply no reason to put the king on g5. So all it can do is get in trouble up there in the middle of the board. Well, relatively speaking, in the middle of the board. So black should just, well, aside from g5, I mean, another approach is just to sit. So just play rook to c7. And it's not like I can do anything other than just advance pawns, and he should trade them off as they move up the board. And all right, there's no real problems to be had here. So king to h6 is an example of trying to do something. Now, when you've got all the pawns on one side of the board, that's one of those occasions where you actually, when you're defending, typically don't want to do something. So I know that you've maybe read and heard and experienced that active defense is the best way to try to hold a position. And most of the time, that's right. But when all the pawns are on one side of the board, it's much more likely to be the case that a kind of a basic not a fortress exactly, but a basic, well, okay, we'll call it a fortress. Not in the sense that you've got a position that can't be attacked or kind of gotten at, but that you're just waiting. So you put every pawn and the king on just solid places, the place where they're going to end up being correctly placed when the strong side brings the pawns up the board, and just wait. All right, so rook c7 simple. g5 I think is a positive move because it arranges the pawns the best way possible. The king goes to g6, and then the rook plays actively to bother the white king. All right, so king h6, the wrong piece is trying to be active. So rook h8 check. Of course, he should just retreat, and then this whole discussion would be academic. But instead, he played king to g5. And now, of course, I played king to g3. And I'm simply threatening h4 mate. The funny thing is, he didn't see this, or maybe he saw it, but he also saw f4 mate. And for that reason, he played rook to c3, h4 mate, game over. So a really lucky finish there. He still could have saved the game, but actually now, unfortunately, it's actually a bit of work. So f5 is forced. It's the only way, and it's giving the king a flight square. But now, okay, I mean, it's still a draw, but now black has to actually be a little bit careful and a bit accurate here. So g5 check, king g7. And here, I think the best try for me is rook to h6. And what I'd like to play here is h5. And then I've got to pass g-pawn and some slim chances for a win. Now, to show a variation where this can work out, let's say black plays rook to a5. Just kind of sits here, waits for me to do something. Okay, so h5 takes. And now, a very important move here. See if you can figure out what white's move ought to play. Okay, well, rook takes h5 is natural, but it's actually not very good because after king to g6, black regains the pawn immediately. The problem for white is that if I play king to h4, trying to hold both the rook and the pawn, rook to a4 check wins for black. So that would be a nightmare. Okay, so rook takes h5, while it's obvious and it's well motivated, is a mistake. So the right move here is king to f4. And now the point of this move is, well, first of all, my g5 pawn is protected. So with my king protecting this, now I can play rook takes h5 without fearing king g6, because if he plays king g6, I just play rook back to h6 check, and everything's safe. Furthermore, I'll throw out rook to a4 check, because then I can just take on f5, and I'm grabbing that pawn, which is the best pawn, because then I've got two connected passers. So let's say he plays h4, going for a little trick here, rook h4, rook a4, just driving my king back, and then rook to a6. And the point of rook to a6 is that white is threatening to play rook h6, rook f6, attacking the pawn, and after, let's say black plays rook to a5, king f4 will win it. Alright, so that's why rook to a6 is a good idea here. Alright, well now rook to h1, so I'm just going to bring the rook around someplace. Actually, okay, yeah, here black should just wait. King to b6, but now the second point, king f4. So now there's no rook to b4 or rook to a4 check. That would just hang the pawn. And now after rook to b5, rook to e1, followed by rook to e5, just wins the game. Okay, we're going back here. If he tries to be active with rook to a4, rook back to h6, and then rook f6, and so on. And I win. Alright, so going back to this position after rook to h6 with the idea of h5, black can only hold the game, I think, with the move rook to c4. Alright, and now if I play f4, he checks me back, and he just keeps checking until my king leaves the area and bothers the f-pawn. And the f-pawn is still in trouble, and here he just sits, and this is a draw. So, after rook to c4, f4 doesn't help. On the other hand, if I play h5, then he takes. Okay, now for rook h5, again, king g6. So f4, and now various ways to draw. Okay, so rook c3 check. If I go up, he plays rook to f3. And, okay, here we have a position where black has to be slightly careful, but only slightly. Alright, so the one move that you have to avoid here is rook to g1 check. Now, if black didn't have his h-pawn, then that would be perfectly good. But here, thanks to king to h6, white just wins, so that would be game over. Alright, so h4 is just fine because after king to h6, just rook to f8, and there's no way for white to win. Now, remember what I said before about h and g pawns, a and b pawns versus c through f pawns. Here, against a g pawn or against an h pawn, a pawn, or b pawn, black can defend purely passively. If you move everything one file to the left, though, then I would have rook to h7, and after king to g8, f7 check, king f8, rook h8 check, and so on, winning. Alright, so the point is, this is a draw. There's no way for me to win, assuming black plays with a little bit of accuracy. But he has to play with a little bit of accuracy, thanks to the earlier mistake. Okay, now this position is actually kind of interesting, but with accurate play, he can just hold on. Alright, but this is definitely, this should never have happened where I even have the chance here to play for a win. So, the thing to remember in these kind of endgames is you just create your fortress and you simply sit. Okay, so the king is fine. The pawns are all taking care of each other, and the rook is active. Alright, so not a well-played game at all by either player, but I think an instructive little game for all of that. So let me show one more. Actually, yeah, I should probably go ahead and stop it at this point. So I'll keep this lecture a little bit shorter, and we'll look at another not-so-brilliant game. Well, okay. Actually, all right, I'll look at one more. So I'll not spend too much time on most of this, but it is kind of interesting. Okay, so this was a very painful game. This was played in my third tournament, and I've been doing very well. In fact, after this tournament, my rating went up to 1811, I think it was. So I gained something like, what was it, 86 points. Yeah, so this was pretty good. I mean, it was a provisional rating, so it was much more, it was much easier to gain points back then. But still, I mean, I played quite well for at least what I expected. And actually, I was really proud of this game, too. And even now, when I look at it, I mean, I'm really kind of surprised that I played as well as I did. Of course, up to the near the very end. All right, so I'll just kind of quickly scroll through the moves here, just because I was very happy with this. So I had white, and all right, so far making kind of routine moves. But this I was really proud of, this bishop to d2 move, with the idea of reposting it on c3. Okay, played there, and now even more remarkable. Okay, so I come up with this, queen to d2, and there are various tricks along the d file. So he plays bishop to e7. I played b3, and this had a dual purpose as well. One purpose is a tactical one, which is that now I have the idea of playing bishop to c4, trying to take advantage of his underdefended d7 knight. Now here he should have played something like what should he do? Maybe just put a rook on d8, so he takes care of that, and maybe kind of eyes my queen along this line. But instead he plays a5, which, okay, positionally it's kind of a normal move. One idea is to play a4. Another idea in some positions is to put a bishop on b4 and swap them off. And a third idea might even be to secure the c5 square for a minor piece without having to worry about b4 at some point. But here it misses this tactic. So bishop to c4. If he plays bishop takes c4, I play queen takes d7, and that wins at least a pawn or two. So rook to d8, takes, and now you see the second point behind b3, queen to c1. And there we go. So I mean, I look at this game and I can't believe that I was so clever back then. I mean, I almost wonder what happened to me. Well, what did I lose in the meantime? So rook a7. If he didn't play that, okay, I'm just going to double on the d file, and at some point I can take on e5. So he just can't hold everything in the long run. But this makes it quicker. So knight e5 takes. Okay, now another nice little maneuver there to get the d file. Very good move again, centralizing. Okay, I mean, I'm just doing everything right here. Here, here. So again, you can't take on c2 because I play rook to d7, king e8, and now another little tactic. He plays king f7, rook e6. So now I'm 3 pawns up, and the queens even go off the board. Okay, I play rook to a6, and so, I mean, what could possibly go wrong here? I mean, this is, I played a brilliant game, at least by my standards at that point, and I'm not sure that I would feel too upset about it now, frankly. And, okay, so I have this wonderful ending, 3 pawns up. My opponent played king to e7. Okay, so here, you know, it looks ridiculous to even ask to find a winning plan, but nevertheless, I'll put that mild challenge before you and ask you to do so. After all, I certainly didn't come anywhere near succeeding in doing that. And in fact, just 8 moves from now, okay, within 8 moves, I'm on the verge of a loss. So my opponent offered me a draw 8 moves later. I accepted it, and in fact, I thought for many years after this that I was simply losing there. Now, it turns out that I have some semi-miraculous ways of just holding a draw, which is itself, you know, kind of remarkable. But, you know, how did I manage to ruin this completely in just 8 moves? All right, well, first of all, your job is to figure out how not to ruin it, but how to win it. Okay, well, as I look at it now, here's how I think about this position. I'm 3 pawns up, and so the only thing that can go wrong is if my opponent gains some counterplay, assuming I don't just hang the rook. So how is he going to gain counterplay? Well, pretty obviously, I mean, he's hitting my c2 pawn, and he's hitting the a2 pawn after that. Now, I don't have to worry about rook takes c2 right away, because rook takes a5 protects the pawn. So I have to beware then, what can he do to take care of the a5 pawn before he takes on c2? And the answer to this is that he can drag his king over to b7. So make an arrow there, kick my rook out, and then play rook takes c2, and rook takes a2, and kind of hope for the best at that point. Now, that takes quite a few moves, right? So it takes him 3 moves to get the king over, and, you know, and even after that, it's not really entirely clear that he's winning or anything, but the point is, that's the only way that he can cause me any problems at all. All right, and if I had even asked myself, okay, why isn't my opponent resigning? What does he hope for? You know, what is there in the position that could possibly go wrong? Well, then I would have been able to solve this position, I think, without too much difficulty. Instead, I blow it. So, okay, what do I play here? Well, what I played here is just a ridiculous move. And again, kind of ironically, it's a similar ridiculous move to what we saw in the previous game, where my opponent played king to h6. So here I played king to h2. And, alright, I mean, I'm trying to activate my king as quickly as possible. That's sensible, but I'm completely oblivious to his idea. What I should have done, and now would do, and just, you know, after a moment's thought, is king to f1. So king to d7, king e1. And now, okay, if he continues, plays king to c7, king to d2, everything's covered. His chances are over. Okay, he can't even play rook to d5 and try to back and forth me there. And even if he did, I could just play king to c1 and sit. So now that my queen side is safe, my rook is free to roam to the king side, and I just push the king side pawns, making sure that, you know, I don't blow anything, I don't lose any of them, but just their gradual advance is going to win without any difficulty at all. If he plays rook takes c2, last chance here, then rook a5, king c6, and, okay, I mean, I could pretty much do almost anything I want to. Maybe the best thing to play is e5, so just to immediately get his king's, or at least to deflect his pieces from active plans. So let's say king b6, rook a8, king b7. Alright, now I can play rook to g8. If he takes, I play e6, rook a6, rook g7 check, then e7, and then there's just nothing to even really consider. I mean, this is simply a dead-won position. Alright, so going back to here, king f1 and just bringing the king over. eliminating the opponent's counterplay. Right, I'm up 3 pawns. I don't have to be up 4 pawns. I don't have to be up 6 pawns. It's enough to just be up to 3, more than enough, really. All I want to do is kill my opponent's counterplay. If I do that, life is good. If I don't, hey, I'm giving him a chance. So king to h2. And here, black shouldn't be greedy. I mean, if rook c2, rook a5, rook f2, king g3. Okay, he's only down 2 pawns now, and my pawns are not perfect, but 2 pawns are still enough to win the game, and he should avoid this. Still, this is much better for black than what I had here. Okay, here 3 pawns up, no counterplay. My structure remains intact. Okay, so king h2, he plays king d7. King g3, king c7. And here I probably still wasn't really very suspicious. All right. Maybe the best now is to play f4. So just to get my e-pawn rolling. And it's kind of bizarre, but at this point I actually have to talk about myself getting counterplay here. All right, I'm 3 pawns up and I'm worried about counterplay because, again, his plan is on the verge of success here. So, all right, so let's say rook c3, king here, takes, and sorry about that. Here I'm winning. If instead he plays king to b7, okay, so I mean this would be the more consistent approach. Rook g6, rook c2, and now probably just take and then play e5 or f5. Really f5, push the pawn that's furthest away from his king. And I should be winning here still. All right. Well, in the game, instead of f4, again, with pushing my own pawns in mind, I just continue as if nothing's wrong. So rook to a7 check, king b6, rook g7, up 4 pawns for a second, rook c2, check, rook a6, h6, rook a2. And, all right, rook h5 is reasonable. I'm pushing his king away from his pawns, so again, I thought I'm in good shape here. So again, 3 pawns up. I have 4 connected passed pawns. So it looks as if, again, it should all be trivial. But at this point now, I think I'm winning, if at all, only it's already problematic. So I think maybe e5 wins, although I really wouldn't bet anything on it. So here's the analysis, or sample line. So rook to b2, e6, check here, rook c3, and now rook to e5 I looked at, and that doesn't win. So rook to h8 is probably best, rook c7, and check. So I have to use my rook now both to try to help my own pawn, but more importantly to stop his, or at least to delay his, as much as possible. Okay, so after king to a7, rook to b5 I think is best, king a6, rook e5 now, rook e7, king f5, king f6, and now rook to b1 is forced. If I play king to f7, I'm actually in trouble. So rook b8, e7, a4. And now his pawn will come to a3, protecting this, and my rook can no longer really do anything but just wait for the queening to occur. So rook to b1 is the right move. And I think I'm winning this. I'm pretty sure I'm winning this. I shouldn't say I think. I'm 95% sure that this is a win for white, at least. But still, even this isn't even 100% clear, and it took an awful lot of really nice finesse to achieve this. All right, well, in the game, I thought, okay, I'll just play defensively now. Play rook to d5, plays here. Play rook to d3. And my opponent, bless his heart, played a4 and offered a draw. And I don't recall how long I thought about this before accepting, but I was just really, I don't know if I wasn't quite in tears, but I was at least morose after this, because, again, I just ruined it. And I felt, I think, even worse when I realized that I was probably losing, because I don't know, somehow just that I had to get a sympathy draw really just made it worse for me somehow psychologically. Well, it turns out that in fact it is objectively a draw, so I can at least feel marginally better, though I think there's absolutely no chance that I would have drawn this, because black's moves are all very easy to find, whereas white has to play with unbelievable accuracy. And in fact, it'd be a very interesting exercise for you to try to figure out how white can draw this. I mean, I remember. I mean, I don't remember how strong I was the last time I analyzed this myself, but it was only when I was analyzing with a computer, I think 5 years or so ago, that I was able to kind of work out some draw. I mean, whenever I tried myself, black was always winning, at least by a tempo. So I came close to holding it a few times, but never, I think, succeeded until reasonably strong computers got into the act. So it's tough, and you can take that as a challenge. Okay, well, I think there may be even two ways to hold it, but they're not 100% sure. Okay, so anyway, here's one. King f4, rook takes b3, check, and now e5. Okay, so here's a sample loss. Rook to d1, a3, e5, rook b2. Okay, and now let's say I play king e3, rook c2. So the point of king e3 is to prevent him from playing rook to e2, right? So he's got to worry about my pawn queening. So king e3, king e3 attempts to shut him off there. So rook c2, f4, giving my pawn some help, but his pawns are faster. e6, rook c8, e7, rook to e8, king d2. That was the point of it. So of course I'm losing the pawn, but trying to bring my king to stop his pawns. But he has king to b4. Say rook e1, a2, and he wins. So he's threatening rook takes e7 here. He's also threatening, of course, b2, and rook e4 check, king a3 does nothing to help. So I'm losing there. Okay, or going back here a ways, if instead of king to e3 I try king to f3, well, it's pretty similar. Rook c2, rook c1, rook e1. See, that was the idea. So that way my rook can protect the pawn. The king's not in the way. But, okay, a2, e7, rook c8. And again, okay, if I queen, he just takes. And otherwise, b3 and the pawns can do it without the help of the rook. So I'm losing there. Okay, so going back to this position here, e5 is what I have to play. Okay, so now rook to b2. Not only hitting the pawn, but threatening to come to e2, so king f3. Now rook to b1. So the point of that was to drive my king a square further back, so it just slows me down a tempo. He loses nothing by doing that. Okay, rook to d5 check, king c4, rook to d2. Now that's a really weird looking move, right? Why in the world would I force his king closer to his pawns? Well, the point of this, okay, if his king goes backward, then my rook gets a little play against his pawns, a little bit more time. Well, if he comes forward, then I have this rook e2 resource. And see, after takes and takes, if he plays king to d5, I have king to d3, and my king is now in time to stop the pawns. At least it gives me enough time to promote my own, so that the race is fine. And of course, he has to come back. Well, I mean, if he doesn't come back, then I can queen 2. That's why I had to draw the king up to c4. So it looks like this is a draw. Well, it doesn't just look like it. It's a quite clear perpetual check draw. So if the king goes to e2, queen d3 holds. If the king goes to d2, queen d3, king e1, queen b1 is a repetition. And if king c1, he just repeats like that. So he'll follow my king wherever it goes. All right, so that's one draw with king to f4. Also, king to g4 draws. So rook takes b3, check. Rook a6, a3, e5, rook b2. Okay, again, with the idea of rook e2 more than rook takes f2. King f3, a2, e6. Okay, so now he's got to stop the pawn. My rook on the 6th rank prevents his king from doing it. So here, and rook to a3. So that's all he can try. But now takes, queen, queen, queen. And this one is also a draw. I'm not sure if it's perpetual. Maybe there's some way for white's king to escape it. But frankly, white should be happy with the draw because, of course, that pawn on a3 is very, very dangerous. So with best play from this position, white can probably hold a draw, but it's ridiculous, you know, and it's just a demonstration of really terrible technique that I had to hold a draw, or that I would have needed to play like a genius to hold the draw, when just 8 moves before I had this position with absolutely no worries at all. So I hope you learned something from this. I think in both games we saw some very common failings. Superficial thinking, definitely a complete lack of a sense of danger. In this case, a failure to ask what my opponent's plan is and how I could get into danger. What else? In both games, too, we had these strange ways of bringing the king into the game. So here, this king h2, g3 idea, kind of decentralizing, is a little bit weird. And my opponent's move in the previous game of king to h6 was also rather strange, too. Also, in that game, in the first game, hopefully you saw some useful lessons about how to properly arrange your pawns. And, okay, even here, too, to some extent, there's a question about the way to hold the defense here. And king to d1, that defensive idea is an important one. So you want to try to neutralize the opponent's opportunities with the 7th or 2nd rank, as the case may be. So altogether, I hope there was some useful information that you gained from this, and you found it instructive, and hopefully also somewhat amusing, too. Certainly, I find these games amusing now. I don't think I found it amusing at the time, but at this point, certainly enough time has passed, 28 years, that it's not a problem. Anyway, thank you very much. I look forward to your feedback on this. I invite all of you to check out my blog, chessmind.powerblogs.com. So take a look at that. I think you'll find much that's enjoyable and instructive there as well. So once again, thank you and good night.